They bet I'd crumble when I received the divorce papers on Christmas, that I'd beg like an abandoned dog in the rain. Marie and her accomplices completely underestimated who Connor Reed was, a man from Charlotte who knows the biggest blows come disguised. What happened over the next few months wasn't just about saving my dignity. It was about dismantling a conspiracy that would destroy many more lives. My name is Connor Reed. I'm 36 years old. I work as a cybersecurity manager in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I thought I had the perfect life. My wife Marie worked as a paralegal at a respected law firm. Our son Tyler, 5, was pure energy and joy, and our bank account was always balanced. We lived in a colonial home in Myers Park with a well-tended garden where Tyler played every weekend. I got home from work at 6:30 p.m. Marie prepared dinner and we watched Netflix after Tyler went to bed, a routine that worked perfectly. Our mornings were like a well-rehearsed ritual that strengthened our family. Marie woke up first, made coffee, got Tyler ready for school while I showered. After breakfast, everyone left for work, and we reunited in the evening to tackle household chores together. Weekends were dedicated to family, parks, movies, visits to grandparents, barbecues with neighbors. Marie was a devoted wife and an exemplary mother who made our home run like clockwork. She organized Tyler's schedule, handled his medical appointments, attended school meetings, and still found time to keep the house tidy. When we came home, she always had something delicious baking or at least a dinner plan. Tyler adored her. She had endless patience to play with him, help with homework, and tell bedtime stories. Our marriage seemed solid and mature, built on total trust. We talked about everything: work, future plans, concerns about Tyler, home improvements. Marie was always a good listener, and I shared the challenges I faced in my tech job. She told me about the interesting cases she handled at the firm, always respecting confidentiality, of course. There were no major conflicts or serious fights, and our family seemed shielded from betrayal. Financially, we were stable with our account always in the black. I earned a solid tech salary. Marie contributed from her law firm job, and we managed to pay all bills, save, and still afford some treats. We planned a family trip to Disney World at year's end, and Marie was excitedly organizing all the details. We were transparent about expenses, both disciplined with money. Tyler was the center of our world and a source of immense pride. He was doing well at school, had friends, played sports, and was a happy, healthy child. Marie always joined school events. I never missed his soccer games, and we spent quality time together every weekend. He called us Mommy and Daddy with so much love that my heart overflowed with gratitude. Socially, we led an active, healthy life that brought stability to our family. Marie got along well with my family, especially my mother, who saw her as a daughter. We had couple friends with whom we regularly socialized, and my wife was friendly and well-liked by everyone. She belonged to a school mothers group, and occasionally went out with friends for happy hour. I had my work friends and occasionally played soccer on Saturday mornings. Everything seemed perfectly in place, and I considered myself a fulfilled man with a perfect family. When I looked at my life, I saw a 36-year-old man with a solid career, a wonderful wife, an amazing son, and a healthy bank account in Charlotte. Marie always supported my career decisions. Tyler filled me with pride every day, and I woke up every morning grateful to have such a special family. There were no signs anything was wrong, and I lived each day with the peace of someone who believes they built something solid and lasting. It was an ordinary Tuesday in November when I received an email that would change my life forever. The subject line read simply, "Important Documents," and it was from Hartwell & Associates, a law firm here in Charlotte. I opened it thinking it might be work-related, maybe some consulting contract I'd forgotten to sign. But when I saw the attached documents bearing my full name in bold capital letters, it felt like the world stopped. Marie had already consulted a lawyer, filled out all the forms, made every decision without consulting me even once. The documents were flawlessly organized, with dates, signatures, and official stamps. She had planned every detail with the precision of a military operation. There was no room for discussion, no possibility of reconciliation, not even a phone call to explain what was happening. It felt like a transaction delivered coldly via email, treated like an invoice to be paid. What shocked me most wasn't the papers themselves, but the coldness with which everything was carried out. Marie had turned our marriage into a business transaction that could be handled by third parties, without even looking me in the eye. She didn't even have the courage for an honest conversation. She let an unknown lawyer do it for her. It was like discovering that the person who slept next to me every night was, in reality, a complete stranger. My first reaction was to call her immediately, but something stopped me before I dialed. A quiet voice in the back of my mind told me I needed to remain composed. Reacting emotionally would be exactly what she wanted. I took a deep breath, put the phone back in my pocket, and reread the documents, this time focusing on the technical details. Something was fundamentally wrong in this situation, and my instincts told me not to show weakness or desperation. When Marie got home that evening, she found me sitting on the couch with the papers spread out on the coffee table. She stopped at the door, clearly expecting shouting, tears, or at least a heated discussion about our future. But I looked her in the eyes and spoke a single word that visibly unsettled her. "Okay," was all I said in a calm, measured tone that even I didn't fully recognize. The expression on her face was one of total surprise. She'd prepared for an emotional battle, but found only silent acceptance. Marie began to stutter through vague explanations about how it wasn't working and how she needed space to grow. But I just sat there, listening without reacting. She expected me to beg, ask about Tyler, create some dramatic scene to validate her choice of abandoning me via a lawyer. But I gave her none of that satisfaction. The silence between us became so uncomfortable that she eventually retreated to the guest room without finishing her explanations. I stayed in the living room late into the night, not crying, not lamenting, but simply processing what had happened. There was something fundamentally dishonest in the way it was handled, something that went far beyond just ending a marriage. The manner of it all told me there were layers in this story I hadn't yet uncovered. That night, while she slept in the guest room, I stayed awake processing not only the end of my marriage, but the cruel and cowardly way it was being executed. Marie had denied me even the dignity of an honest conversation about our problems. She chose to treat me as an obstacle to be removed. It was in that moment I realized my calm reaction wasn't weakness, but something far more powerful. I didn't yet know what the coming days would bring, but one thing was certain. Those who act in shadows usually have more secrets to hide. The days after receiving the divorce papers were the quietest of my life, but also the most productive. While Marie acted like nothing had happened, making breakfast and taking Tyler to school as usual, I began moving in a completely different way. There were no emotional outbursts, no heated arguments, just a strange calm that even surprised me. The following Wednesday, I called my boss and said I needed a few days off for personal reasons. My first stop was the office of David Chen, a family law attorney a co-worker had recommended years ago. David had a solid reputation in Charlotte, and when I explained my situation, he looked at me with a mixture of surprise and professional concern. "Connor, the way your wife is handling this isn't typical," he said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the documents. "Usually, when someone acts with this kind of coldness and haste, there are more things at play than just wanting to end a marriage." David advised me on my rights and gave me a list of documents to gather immediately. Bank statements from the last 2 years, tax returns, house paperwork, insurance policies, and any correspondence related to our finances. "You work in digital security, Connor," he said with a knowing smile. "Use your skills to protect your own data before it's too late." I left his office with a clear mission: find out exactly what was happening behind the scenes of my own life. That night, while Marie watched TV in the living room, I locked myself in my home office with the excuse that I was catching up on some overdue projects. In reality, I started doing something I'd never imagined: investigating my own family. I logged into our online bank account and began reviewing every transaction from the last 6 months, looking for patterns or charges that didn't make sense. What I found in the first 2 hours of analysis sent a chill down my spine and made me realize my situation was far more complex than I thought. There were regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize, small amounts, $200 or $300, and they'd go unnoticed in a casual check. Stranger still, these transfers always happened on Tuesdays and Thursdays, at the same time, with the generic description, services. My cybersecurity background taught me that regular patterns usually indicate automated or planned behavior, and this definitely didn't look like casual spending. I used my phone to photograph each of these transactions, organizing them by date in a folder on my computer. What intrigued me most was discovering that Marie had opened a personal bank account 3 months earlier, something she never mentioned. Our agreement had always been total financial transparency, with a joint account for household expenses and individual accounts only for minor personal purchases. But this new account was receiving regular deposits from sources I couldn't immediately identify. They weren't from her salary. I knew the pattern of deposits from the law firm where she worked. On Friday, I made a decision that changed everything. I hired a private investigator. James Morrison had 20 years of experience, most of it as a detective in Charlotte Police, and David Chen had given me his card with a personal recommendation. "This isn't surveillance, Connor," James explained during our first meeting at a discreet downtown cafe. "It's about legal protection. If there's fraudulent behavior or hidden assets, you need documented evidence to protect yourself in the process." He gave me specific instructions on how to collect documentation without invading privacy, so that the records would be admissible in court. That week, my life split into 2 completely different layers. On the surface, I was the same Connor, taking Tyler to soccer on Saturday, grocery shopping, watching movies with him on Sunday. But beneath that normality, I'd become an investigator of my own life, documenting every inconsistency, every little lie, every sign that Marie had built a secret, parallel life. What was most striking was how she continued to act normally, as if sending divorce papers by email was just another administrative chore in her week. What James Morrison brought me the following Tuesday completely changed my perspective on the situation. He arrived at my office with a thick envelope and a mix of surprise and professional outrage on his face. "Connor, do you remember signing any odd or unusual document in recent months?" he asked as he pulled a sheet from the envelope. It was a photocopy of something I had entirely forgotten, a fun contract Marie asked me to sign at her birthday party in March. At the time, it seemed like a playful gimmick she planned to entertain guests. Marie had drafted a document where I promised never to question her spending or interfere with her financial decisions as a sign of total trust between husband and wife. Everyone laughed when I signed, especially when she struck a pose as an independent wife for social media. I believed it was innocent fun. At least, that's what I thought. James showed me that Marie took the document to be notarized the very next week, without my knowledge or consent. "Connor, your wife turned a joke into a legally binding document," James explained, pointing to the official notary stamp at the bottom of the page. "She used it to legally justify all those suspicious transfers we found in the joint bank account. Whenever the bank or authorities questioned the odd transactions, she'd present this document as proof she had full authorization to manage the family finances." It felt like a punch to the gut. I had been deceived in the cruelest and most calculated way imaginable. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it had turned into a legal and financial violation. The most devastating discovery came when James showed me the full results of the investigation into those mysterious bank transfers. The money Marie was moving wasn't just hers. It was using our family account as a channel for questionable operations. She'd been involved with people needing to launder money of dubious origin, and our reputation as a respectable Charlotte family was just a facade. My wife had turned our marriage into a tool for activities that could destroy my career and my life altogether. James explained that Marie had deliberately chosen the timing of the divorce request because she knew I would eventually find the financial inconsistencies. She needed to cut ties before you could ask harder questions about the money, he said, arranging the documents neatly on the table. The divorce isn't about relationship issues. It's about her protecting herself from accountability once the truth comes out. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a legal shield being discarded once I became expendable. But the revelation that truly shook me came when James presented evidence that Tyler wasn't my biological son. Through discreet and lawful investigation, he discovered Marie had maintained regular financial contact with Tyler's real father. She used my supposed paternity as another layer of protection, knowing that a respectable family man would lend credibility to her dubious activities. It was a 5-year fraud, raising a child who didn't share my DNA. At that moment, I realized this was about far more than saving my marriage or understanding why Marie wanted a divorce. It was about stopping her from using innocent people as tools for her questionable schemes. "Connor," James said, looking me straight in the eye, "you have evidence that can protect other families from going through what you did. The question is, do you just want personal justice, or do you want to do what's right, even if it means exposing everything publicly?" When I left James's office that afternoon, I knew I faced a crucial decision. It wasn't about seeking personal revenge or getting back what was lost, because I knew that wouldn't come back. It was about achieving real justice, even if that meant publicly revealing the humiliation I'd endured in silence. Marie underestimated one fundamental truth. She picked the wrong man to deceive. A person who works in digital security knows exactly how seemingly secure systems can be completely exposed once you have the right tools and the determination to uncover the truth. The following Monday, I was sitting in David Chen's office with a neatly organized folder containing all the evidence James had collected over the past weeks. David reviewed each document with surgical precision, occasionally jotting notes and shaking his head in disapproval. "Connor, what your wife did is not just morally questionable, it is criminal and actionable," he said, adjusting his glasses as he examined the notarized fund contract. He explained that we had two paths: resolve everything quietly through an out-of-court settlement, or expose all of Marie's illegal activities publicly through the proper channels. "If we choose the second option," he said, placing his hands on the table, "it will protect other families from what you've been through, but it will also publicly expose your personal life." I didn't hesitate for a second. The choice was obvious: full exposure through legal means. Our first move was to notify the North Carolina Bar Association about the questionable activities involving the law firm where Marie worked. David submitted detailed evidence of the suspicious transfers, misuse of the fraudulent document, and patterns suggesting systemic ethical violations. Within 48 hours, we received confirmation that a formal investigation had been opened, not only against Marie, but the entire firm. Simultaneously, we filed a civil lawsuit for document fraud and misuse of the bank account, attaching all the evidence James had legally and ethically secured. The judge who reviewed the preliminary case was visibly outraged by the sophistication of Marie's scheme. "This is one of the clearest cases of systematic manipulation I've ever seen," he remarked during the initial hearing. What impressed me most was how swiftly everything collapsed once the authorities had full access to the evidence. Marie was informed of the ethics investigation on a Tuesday. The civil suit followed on Wednesday. And by Thursday, her personal bank account was frozen by court order. In less than a week, the structure she'd built over years began to crumble. The most devastating blow to Marie came when authorities confirmed that Tyler's biological father was also under investigation for his own questionable activities. Derek Walsh, the firm partner, wasn't just an accomplice in the financial misdeeds. He was using his position to facilitate schemes involving multiple families. Marie had teamed up with the wrong person, and now both faced consequences far beyond marital issues. That Friday, I got a call from James saying Marie had frantically tried to contact my office multiple times throughout the day. "She wants to negotiate," he said with a tone that mixed professionalism and satisfaction. "But Connor, you need to understand, this is now in the hands of the proper authorities. It's no longer a personal matter between the two of you." The most rewarding moment came the next Monday, when David called with news that changed everything. "Connor, the law firm where Marie worked has just been temporarily shut down pending a federal investigation," he said, barely hiding the satisfaction in his voice. "Your decision to expose everything through the right channels didn't just protect you. It protected dozens of other families who were being harmed by the same scheme." It was no longer about my destroyed family. It was about preventing other families from suffering the same fate Marie and her accomplices had caused. The fallout from the investigations hit Marie with a devastating force she clearly hadn't anticipated. In 2 weeks, she lost her job, had her professional license temporarily suspended, and faced civil lawsuits that would drain her savings for years. Derek Walsh, Tyler's biological father, was fired from the firm and was facing legal consequences of his own. The network of complicity they had built over years collapsed like a wet house of cards. On her first attempt to reach out, Marie called my cell phone on a Tuesday night, clearly desperate to negotiate some kind of deal. When I answered, she began with the usual refrain, that things had gotten out of control, and she never wanted it to come to this. I listened silently for exactly 30 seconds, then said simply, "The lawyers speak from now on," and hung up. There was nothing left for us to discuss personally. All communication would go through the proper legal channels. 2 weeks later, she tried a different approach, showing up at my house on a Sunday morning with Tyler by her side. She had lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes, and spoke rapidly about how we needed to think about the child's well-being and find an amicable solution. I greeted her politely, asked Tyler to come inside and play while we talked outside. I told her my decision was final. There would be no reconciliation or negotiation outside of court. The following Thursday, I received a handwritten letter from Marie, delivered through my office, in which she tried to appeal to our shared history and the good times we had together. The letter was 3 pages long, reminiscences about our honeymoon, how Tyler lovingly called me daddy, how she had made mistakes but still loved me. I read every word carefully, folded the letter neatly, and placed it in a folder with all the other case documents. What surprised me most was discovering that other people had also suffered from Marie and Derek's activities, and several of them contacted me to thank me for exposing the truth. An elderly woman had lost $40,000 in investments that had actually funded their questionable operations. A young couple had been deceived when buying a home in which Marie acted as a fraudulent intermediary. My decision to seek justice protected far more people than I initially realized. On that Friday of the 3rd week, Marie made her final outreach via text message. "Connor, I know you hate me, but Tyler still needs stability. Can we at least talk about that as adults?" I stared at the message for minutes, typed and deleted multiple responses, but in the end I simply deleted the message without replying. There was nothing left to say. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. The divorce was finalized on a quiet Thursday morning in court, where only the attorneys spoke. Marie sat on the other side of the room, avoiding eye contact as the judge read the terms of the agreement. She was granted custody of Tyler but received no child support, since paternity had been clarified. I walked away with the house, most of the assets, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served through the proper channels. When I left the courthouse that morning, I felt a strange mix of relief and melancholy. There were no real winners here, only appropriate consequences for bad choices. Marie had bet I'd be too weak to fight, that I'd silently accept any humiliation she wanted to inflict. She had utterly underestimated the power of documented truth and justice administered correctly. I didn't need to shout or seek revenge. It was enough to let the facts speak for themselves, and they spoke with devastating clarity. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I moved into a smaller house in a quiet Charlotte neighborhood, far from all the memories Marie and I had built together. It was a simple place with 2 bedrooms and a small garden where I began growing tomatoes and peppers, something I never imagined doing in my life. My mornings now started with coffee on the porch, reading the news on my tablet, unhurried, untroubled, without fear of finding more lies or betrayals in my own home. My cybersecurity work continued as usual, but now I had a renewed perspective on protecting systems and spotting vulnerabilities. Every project I developed, every security flaw I found, carried deeper meaning. I knew firsthand what it meant to have your life invaded and compromised by the person you trusted most. My colleagues noticed I'd become more meticulous, more detail-oriented, and that reflected in promotions and professional recognition. In the third week of October, I received a letter that completely shifted my outlook on everything that had happened. It came from Margaret Santos, the elderly woman who lost $40,000 in the scheme Marie was involved in. "Dear Mr. Reed," she wrote in shaky but determined handwriting, "your courage in exposing the truth restored not only my money, but my faith in justice. My grandchildren will be able to go to college because of what you did." When I finished reading it, I realized that my personal pain had transformed into something much greater and more meaningful. The nights alone, which at first felt endless and melancholy, gradually became moments of peace and reflection I hadn't experienced in years. I began reading books I'd bought but never opened, watching documentaries about topics that truly interested me, and cooking meals that Marie would never have approved. It was strange to rediscover parts of myself that had lain dormant during 8 years of marriage, as if I were rediscovering who Connor Reed was when no one else was defining him. Occasionally, I ran into acquaintances at the grocery store or professional events who asked about the divorce with that morbid curiosity people have about others' tragedies. I learned to reply with a simple phrase: "It was the best decision I've ever made." No elaboration, no drama, no invitation for pity, because that was the truth. Escaping Marie freed me from a prison I didn't even realize I was in. By year's end, I received an offer to lead a digital security project for an international bank, something that would require travel and far greater responsibilities than I'd ever taken on before. It was the kind of opportunity I never would have been able to accept when I was married, constantly considering Marie's opinions on every major career decision. I accepted without hesitation, knowing that I could finally make choices based solely on what was best for me and my future. Weekends are now dedicated to activities that genuinely bring me joy. Hikes on trails near Charlotte, playing football with friends, and visiting my parents, who could genuinely see me happy again for the first time. They never said it directly, but I could tell from their subtle remarks that they always knew something was off during my marriage to Marie. "You seem lighter," my mother told me one afternoon over lunch. "More like the Connor we knew when you were younger." Some nights when the house settled into silence, I'd pick up Margaret Santos's letter and reread her words of gratitude. In those moments, I understood that everything I'd been through, the betrayal, humiliation, legal battle, public exposure, served a purpose greater than my own suffering. My family may have fallen apart, but other families were spared. My trust was shattered, but my integrity remained. And in the end, I learned that sometimes the greatest vengeance isn't in hurting the one who hurt you. It's simply building a better life without them. The biggest betrayal wasn't that Marie deceived me. It was that she underestimated me. For years, she bet I'd be too weak to fight back, that I'd accept any humiliation in silence. What she didn't count on is that justice doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to be documented and delivered at the right time. If you've made it this far, it's because you understand that stories like this are really about dignity. Maybe you've been through something similar. Share your story in the comments, not for revenge, but so other men know it's possible to come out stronger. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to make the right decision. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more stories like this. Every week I share real accounts of men who faced impossible situations and found powerful ways to overcome betrayal. And if you know someone who needs to hear that it's possible to rebuild after a devastating betrayal, share this video with them.